All right, here we go. Okay, so in the unit circle, okay, I'm not talking over you. All right, so if this is 0 degrees, it's 0 radians. And let's start by just filling in the quadrantal. So if this is 0 degrees and 0 radians, yes, I am, thank you. I get 1 and 0. You're welcome. This is 90 and pi over 2, and this is 0, 1. This would be negative 1 and 0. It's 180 degrees, and it's pi. At the bottom is 270. I know this is 0 and negative 1. And this is 3 pi over 2. And to finish it off, this is 360, and that's 2 pi. And then if you look at all the quadrants, this one's positive and positive. This one's negative and positive. Negative and negative. Okay, well you know what the quadrants are. I know Marvin. Was that Marvin? All right. So the last thing, the first number is the cosine and the second number is the sine. So the x is the cosine and the y is the sine. Now, so if this is 0, how many degrees is this one? 30, bless you. And this one is 45, and this one is 60. So to get the radians, if this is pi over 2, 60 is pi over 3. This is pi over 4, and pi over 6.
So we're going to be using this for y?
And so then you can use the hand trick to fill in the values in the first quadrant. So if I'm doing 30 degrees, the x value is the square root of 3 over 2 and 1/2. And if I do 45, what's the values? For both of them, right? Very good. And for 60, the cosine is, and then the square root of 3 over 2. So I think most of you do pretty well with all of that. So turn over your paper. So I want the cosine of 5 pi over 6. So the reference angle is what? Pi over 6. So if the reference angle is pi over 6, which by the way is 30 degrees, correct? 180 divided by 6 is 30. So my values are the square root of 3 over 2 and 1/2. So the next thing I'm going to ask myself is, if this is 30, 5 times 30 makes it, which is in which quadrant? Second quadrant. And in the second quadrant, what is positive and what is negative? Okay. So is the cosine the x value or the y value? X. And you just told me the x was negative. So the cosine of 5 pi over 6 is negative square root of 3 over 2. The sine of 5 pi over 6, the y value is positive, so it's 1/2. So what was the inverse of the cosine? The secant of 5 pi over 6. So what do I do to find the secant? Flip the cosine, right? So I'm going to have 2 over negative square root of 3. Can I have a negative square root of 3 on the bottom? So I'm going to do square root of 3 over square root of 3, which is going to be 2 square root of 3 over 3, and it was negative.
Wait a minute, you said flip the cosine?
Right, because that's the inverse of the secant. So the cosecant, which one do I flip for the cosecant? The y, which is the sine, and that becomes 2. So then I want the tangent of 5 pi over 6. Y over x. So my sine is a half, and my cosine is negative square root of 3 over 2. Flip which one? Flip the bottom. So I get 1/2 times 2 over negative 3. The 2's cancel out, and I have 1 over negative square root of 3. Can I have that on the bottom? So I get a negative square root of 3 over 3. So what can I do for the cotangent now? So the cotangent is the inverse of the tangent. So I can either do x over y, or could I flip this and get it? So either way, you get the exact same answer. So, yeah. So if I do 3 over negative square root of 3, and what happens with the 3's? They cancel, and I get negative square root of 3. Okay, so this is what you all whined about for 2 weeks before break, just for the record.
Well, I forgot how to do that.
Like, but was it hard? No, not a single one of them were. All right. Okay. Okay. So the next thing I want to look at is the second quadrant. So to get from 90 to here, how much am I adding? 30, so that gives me 120. To get from 180 back to here is 150. I'm subtracting 50. And to get from here to here, how much do I add? Yes, 135. So now, 120. How many 60s is that? 2. So this is 2 pi over 3. 150 is how many 30s? So it's 5 pi over 6. So the 45, so watch on the 45. If I have 1, 2, 3, I have 3 45s, right? 3 pi over 4. So now, how much did I subtract right here? 30. So to get the values over here, if the reference angle is 30, I have the square root of 3 over 2 and a half. But which one is negative this time? X. What's always the values of 45? And which one is negative? X. And now the reference angle is 60, so I have 1/2 and the square root of 3 over 2, and the x is negative. So to go to the third quadrant, I'm adding 30, so this is 210. This one I'm subtracting 30, so it's 240. And this one I'm going to add 15, so I get 225. So 210 is how many 30s? 7. So 7 pi over 6. 240 is how many 60s? 4. Who said 5? Did you say 5? I'm going to hand you a calculator from now on. So we're going to do 4 pi over 3. How many 60s? Which one? Oh, I'm sorry.
Have y'all not seen that pattern? She go outside, they go inside. Because I messed up right like 4 times.
And then how many in the middle? It is 5. So to get from 3 pi over 4, I added 2 more pi over 4, so I get 5 pi over 4. Okay, when we're done, you're fine. You're good. So pi over 6 is the reference angle. So pi over 6 is square root of 3 over 2 and a half, and they're both negative. So this is negative square root of 2 over 2, negative square root of 2 over 2. And pi over 3, the reference angle is a half and negative square root of 3 over 2. So if I add 30, I get 300. If I subtract 30, I get 330. If I add 15, I get 315. So 300 is how many 60s? So 5 pi over 3. 315 is how many pi over 4s? 7 pi over 4. 330 is how many 30s? 11 pi over 6.
Wait, how much is 315?
So the pi over 3 is a half, and the y is negative square root of 3 over 2. Negative square root of 2, positive square root of 2, sorry, over 2, and a negative square root of 2 over 2. And then square root of 3 over 2 and a negative 1/2.